Welcome to another episode of the Student Loan Planner Podcast. I hope you had a wonderful holiday season. As I record this, still have some family staying over the room that I use to record my podcast. So this is going to be a quick episode today. I thought I would sort of reflect on a few things about student loans for this coming year that we have ahead of us. And also I wanted to reflect a little bit on something kind of weird and technical that I think could save you a lot of money about investments. So the first thing I want to talk about is just the year ahead that we've got for student loans. One big change is all the stuff that President Biden did. I think that the reflex in the Trump administration for Department of Education is going to be, Biden did this equals bad. Biden did this equals change, right? The catch is going to be if something's super technical, I think they'll probably ignore it. So what I mean by that is collecting student loan payments. This has been put off over and over and over again during the Biden administration. They were supposed to resume collections, and collections on student loans is pretty intense. They'll garnish Social Security checks, for example. They'll garnish tax refunds, for example. So that was going on until the pandemic put a halt on all those things with the CARES Act protections. And then the Biden administration was supposed to start collecting student loans again in a normal way. But right before the election, they said, screw it, let's not do this. And so they kicked the can down the road on that. And so with this new Trump administration, Department of Education, you will see student loan, the collection machine restart again for the first time since early 2020. And what that means is, you can no longer just get on a forbearance, for however long you want with no consequences. You will see negative credit information reported to the bureaus if you don't make payments. Now, you can apply still for forbearance in the same way that you did, before COVID. But it is a discretionary forbearance that's at the discretion of the servicer as to whether or not they give it to you. Now, in my experience, they almost always give it to you if you ask. You can cite pretty much any reason. You can cite a truthful reason, which is just, I don't, want to make a payment right now, or I'm having a hard time making the payments right now with everything else I've got going on. You can be vague and be truthful, of course, and they'll generally approve it if you need one. But that is going to be changing. Now, one thing I think will change is income-driven repayment recertification dates. I do think that once the new Department of Ed folks get in there and get installed, they're going to think, this is kind of weird. We're not asking anybody to tell us what they're making for their income-based repayment until 2026. Maybe let's change that. So I do think that you might see some guidance that people have to very quickly recertify their payments. Now, this might happen for borrowers in the sense of if you get a clear ruling from the Eighth Circuit that comes down that says X, Y, and Z plans are illegal, it might force borrowers to recertify their payments under a different repayment plan, in which case this whole idea of this IDR recertification date being kicked down the road and whether or not it will be, that point would be moot, because if everything except for IBR was found to be illegal, well, pretty much everybody is on pay or the save forbearance, right? Very few people are on pure IBR these days. And so that would effectively force everyone to recertify their payments, even if they didn't want to. So that might be kind of a backdoor way to end this IDR recertification pause that's been also lasting as long as the pandemic has been. And I think that, depending on what the Eighth Circuit ruling gives us, we might see President Trump's administration try to come out with their own version of income-driven repayment. But that depends on whether or not the courts find this whole ICR statute to be illegal or not. So those are some predictions on student loans. I wanted to cover something kind of random and interesting, I think, that could save you money on taxes and investment and make you more money in investments real quick. And this is something that actually I have some personal experience with, and so I think it's kind of interesting to share something that personally impacted me in a negative way so that it doesn't happen to you. And that's paying attention to your cost basis. Now, you might think that because I have a podcast, I'm some sort of genius and therefore you never make investment mistakes, and you'd be wrong. I'm just a person with more training in investment management, more professional experience in investment management than most other people, but I still make mistakes too. And one of the mistakes I made when I first started out investing in mutual funds is I didn't realize that the average cost basis method is how mutual fund companies report on what your cost basis is when you go ahead and sell shares. Now, let me explain what that is. So what is cost basis? What does that even mean? So let's say you put $1,000 in a mutual fund and it goes up to $2,000 because of the market going up, right? Your cost basis would be $1,000, and the market value of everything is $2,000. So let's say that, you put in $1,000, now it's worth two. And let's say that you wanted to, your favorite college football teams in the playoff, or Taylor Swift's doing a concert, and you needed to raise money to go do that thing, right? So you need to sell something. So you go in your $2,000 market position of stocks, and you say, let's say you want to sell $1,000, let's say, okay? So if you want to go in and sell $1,000 of your $2,000 position, what they're going to ask you is, well, what cost method do you want to select? So if you do, the better way to kind of describe this is usually when you invest over a long period of time, right? So you might be investing $1,000 a month for, say 10 years, or maybe it's 100 a month for 10 years, right? And so you're going to have a huge number of different individual positions. And then at times you might make big lump sum contributions, maybe when you're getting a bonus or something. And so you put all this money in, and you're going to have all these different kind of times that you bought investments, right? And eventually you want to use this money. Eventually this money is meant to be used, right? So when you go and take that money out, let's say you pull your $1,000 out. Let's say instead of this example where you had one purchase, let's say that you had a bunch of purchases and you're pulling out $1,000 at any given time. Well, if you use that default method, which if you do not select out of it, if you do not opt out of it, any mutual fund, generally speaking, is going to hit you with this average cost method. It'll cost you tons of money and extra taxes you don't need to pay. So instead, you could use a different method, such as, basically last in, first out, or highest, priced shares are the first out. You could do first in, first out, or you could do specific identification of shares where you get to pick which one you're selling. Now, if you have the opportunity to select what method you use when you do investments and sell stuff, you want to use specific identification every single time if you can help it. And the reason is you could pick the investment that has the smallest gain in any position, and when you sell it, you'll incur less taxes. Now, if you're donating shares, you want to go with the thing that's got the biggest gain because you can get it out of your portfolio. So let me give you an example of how this bit me in the foot, so to speak, in a recent thing that I did. So because I didn't realize that I had been using average cost, like when I first started investing, and I switched over to this specific identification of shares, basically because of some stuff I did where I was doing tax-loss harvesting trades, I was doing conversion of old mutual funds to ETFs, I was doing a lot of stuff, right? And I noticed, oh wait, my price per share is all the same until, a certain date. And so generally speaking, when you're donating shares that have got the biggest gains. You want to donate the shares the biggest gains. And those are usually your oldest shares because the market tends to go up over time. And so because I had not been investing the right way early on, I was not able to select the shares that had the biggest gains, which happened to be during the trough of COVID, right? When the market was really down. And so that caused me to not be able to donate the largest gain positions to get those out of my portfolio. Well, eventually I'm going to want to use some of that money in my portfolio. And when I go to sell it, I'm not going to be able to get, shares out of my portfolio that have, the gains that I really wish that I had. What it's going to mean basically is it's going to cost me a lot of money in taxes. And I think this happens to a lot of people that listen to this podcast and they don't even realize it. What I mean by that is you go in, you hear index funds, right? You hear in an internet forum paying, an AUM fee is bad. That's dumb. Don't do that. That's only dumb people do that. And you think, well, I'm a really educated professional. I shouldn't, need help to do this. It's easy. Just do index funds, right? And then you put the money in a brokerage account and then you go turn around, in 5 years and put down $100,000 deposit in your vacation home. And because you didn't change your cost basis method, something that's technical, annoying, what even is this that Travis is talking about? This is kind of a weird concept. When you don't make that selection to switch that cost basis method to the thing that gives you the lowest tax bill, then instead of a $100,000 sale for this deposit you need for your house, maybe that $100,000, the way you sell it gives you a $50,000 gain, but maybe it could have given you only a $10,000 gain if you'd selected the right shares that have the lowest gains over time that you've been investing. And so instead of incurring a $10,000 gain, you incur a $50,000 gain. You have to pay capital gains tax in this on $50,000 of gains instead of $10,000. Well, maybe you're in an income-driven repayment plan. maybe you are in a state with an income tax. Maybe let's say it's, a 5% state income tax, 10% IDR. Let's say you're in a 24% bracket for capital gains, roughly. So including the ACA tax, that's basically 40%. So 40% of $50,000 in gains is 20 grand, and 40% of $10,000 gains is 4 grand. So that's a $16,000 tax bill that you incurred that you could have avoided. Now, if you think about, a $16,000 tax bill that you could have avoided, well, what about, what about AUM fees? I heard those are bad, right? So let's say you have $1 million portfolio you're paying 1% on. That's $10,000 every year, right? No, and you might say, well, that's exponential. Well, the math mistake people make is it's only $10,000 a year if you already have $1 million. If you don't have $1 million a year already, then 1% of not $1 million is not $10,000 a year. So if you think about an accumulator, I think the way that somebody would really get hosed on an AUM fee is if you pay that AUM fee for decades and you have multiple millions of dollars and you never hit a break point. Well, a break point is essentially, if you have above a certain amount of money, generally speaking, that AUM fee can be lower the more money you have. That's what a lot of places will do, right? And then I think a lot of folks hear AUM fee, but what kind of happens is a lot of people charge like an AUM fee that's basically just they pick a bunch of active mutual funds to make things look complicated. They pick 12 different or 15 different funds to make things look impressive, and they charge not 1%, they charge 1.25 or something like that, and don't add a lot of value. And then that kind of fee structure seems like it's a ripoff, right? I think that what helps is when you have the interest yourself to pay attention to weird, technical, annoying things like cost basis, where you're paying attention to what are the tax implications of when I go and sell something and eventually want to use my money, right? I think that's worth a lot of money. And the question is as long as you're saving more than the cost of getting that advice, if you feel like you need that advice, then it's probably a good deal, I think. Now, in terms of all the different ways that you can cost yourself money in investing, right? I think the thing that people don't realize is, what amount of investment taxes you're paying at age 60 actually does have a lot to do with how you handled things, when you were age 30 and 40 and age 50. So in other words, like, it's kind of like, I don't know, I'm not a medical doctor, so I'm going to get in trouble here, right? But if you're 60 years old, like a lot of the stuff that you did back when you were younger, like, has this huge impact on your arteries and your heart health and how clear the arteries are and stuff like that, probably, right? So I think it's something similar with investments. Like, the stuff you start doing, the habits you have when you're younger, and the way you pay attention to details when you're investing, when you're building wealth, really do matter. And something like as arcane and weird as like selecting your cost basis, and if you have a mutual fund, opting out of average cost into specific identification of shares. You can do that, by the way, if you already have mutual funds. It doesn't matter for retirement accounts because you don't pay taxes when you sell on retirement accounts. But a brokerage account, a taxable account, which you can touch before age 60, you absolutely need to be paying attention to that cost basis method. And if you have ETFs or stocks, then you need to make sure you select out of the first in, first out method, which tends to result in higher tax bills, and switch over to specific identification of shares. What's the point of this? So you can use your money better. So you can take that money and actually spend it in a way that, results in lower taxes, which means that you have more money to keep and spend and enjoy how you want. And eventually, you'll probably have so much money that you'll want to be charitably inclined. And the smart way to handle donation of money is not writing a check. It's identifying in your portfolio, what's the largest gain that I have? What's the stock with the biggest gain? Taking that stock, donating it directly to a donor advised fund. I use one called Daffy. Vanguard Charitable, Fidelity Charitable are also options. And then you essentially get that full value, market value of that donation right away when you donate it, but you also don't have to pay tax on the gain. So it's a brilliant way to get huge gains out of your portfolio and then take the cash that you would have cut a check for to the charity and then go put it into your portfolio at a much higher cost basis, which means when you go and sell that stock to use it one day, you'll pay tax on a way lower gain. So this is what I mean by paying attention to detail. If as long as you're aware of these things, you'll save a lot more money than probably somebody that's not aware of these things. And you might say, what even is this? And what I'm saying is this is kind of bizarre, right? But my total stock market index fund, back in the day, if I had been paying a competent financial planner back in the day when I first started investing to help me understand cost basis and to help me select the right cost basis, that would have more than paid for most any AUM fee because of the tax consequences that I'm incurring today because I didn't know that years ago. So that's just kind of an interesting personal story that I thought y'all would be at least intrigued by or find it interesting maybe. But one thing that I'm kind of looking at doing for the business overall this year is to try to focus more on how to help our listeners grow wealth. Obviously, we're doing another episode on every Friday. We're doing a Wealth Financially Free Fridays episode. We're intentionally doing that to try to give student loan borrowers and professionals more ideas on how to grow their wealth and how to achieve financial freedom, right? And, if you listen to this stuff, I think that you probably enjoy some of the weird technical things we like to cover sometimes. We like to keep it kind of like not too technical, but just interesting enough that you might find it enjoyable. And I do think that, obviously if you have a professional degree or graduate education, getting a little technical sometimes is probably a good thing because it shows you new things that maybe you didn't think about or know about as deeply as you might have wanted to know about. So cost basis, look up the different types of cost basis methods. Realize that the default method for you is actually pretty bad for most investors. The DIY method of investing that somebody says index funds, I get great returns in my total stock market index. That's all I need to do. Well, actually, nope. You need to pay attention to taxes. You need to pay attention to cost basis. You need to pay attention to how you're contributing and what are going to be the tax consequences when you inevitably withdraw money. Those things matter. So hopefully you had a good holiday again. Hopefully you're cool with a little short and abbreviated episode today. If you have student loan questions, usually my Tuesday episodes are more student loan themed, but I just thought I'd go on a cost basis rant because, why not? But if you have a student loan question, go to studentloanplanner.com/voicemail and just press that record button on your phone and ask whatever's on your mind. Going to be a really intense year on student loan front. We're going to see a lot of changes. I know that for sure. The question is, what will they be? I don't know, but we'll cover things on the pod so you don't have to worry about it. Thank you, everybody, and have a great rest of your week.